when my mother locked eyes with me and said, "You're not half the woman your sister is," the room seemed to tilt, like the floor had quietly given way. A younger version of me would have smiled, swallowed the knife, and pretended dessert made it all better. Instead, I slid my chair back and felt the legs scrape the hardwood like a warning bell. "Then let her pay the rent for you," I said. The words were calm, but my pulse thundered in my neck. My father's glass paused midair. "Rent? What rent?" His voice sat between confusion and dread. And in that thin space, I finally stepped into my own life. "The mortgage," I said, and I watched the pride drain from his face like color from a photograph. "For 3 years I've been sending money, so this house didn't go under." The table went still. My sister Elise tilted her head with the kind of concern that photographs well and costs nothing. My mother's smile twitched at the edges, a stage curtain refusing to fall. On that Friday night, under the amber dining light that always made her roast look heroic, my secret cracked open like a bone, and I decided I was done with the taste of silence. They told me I was sensitive as if that were a disease. Sensitive when I was 15 and my calculus medal didn't make the holiday letter. Sensitive when Elise won another debate trophy, and I clapped until my hands shook. Sensitive when the bank called my mother in the middle of a winter I can still feel in my teeth, and her voice, usually lacquered and sharp, arrived at my ear, frayed and afraid. "Nora, if the payment doesn't go through, they'll send a notice next week." I was 25 then, a financial manager in Portland with a spreadsheet for everything, even the invisible costs of hope. I had a planned down payment in 2 years, a balcony that faced morning light, a chair that fit me perfectly. I said yes to saving the house because my mother's breath kept hitching, and because I believed the word family meant a debt we paid together. Just this once turned into a monthly ritual, a tithe to a God that never spoke my name. I automated the transfers on the 15th so I didn't have to watch my hands do it. When I opened my banking app, I told myself I was buying time, not erasing myself. 36 months later, the number was 70,000, and the only thing I owned was exhaustion. So on the night I finally said the number out loud, my father lifted his chin like a judge considering precedent. "We appreciate your help," he said carefully, "but bringing it up at dinner is inappropriate." The word hung there, perfumed and poisonous. My mother pressed her napkin to her lips. "No one asked you to keep doing it." Elise's fork rested against her plate, and she looked down the way people do when the truth is a bright light you can't look into without blinking. I almost laughed. Inappropriate was the word I used for shoes at a funeral, for jokes at a wake, not for the act of picking up a house with bare hands so it didn't slide into the bank's open mouth. But I understood them. A story is easier to live inside if the ugliest lines are cut in the edit. I had allowed them to edit me for so long, I'd become a rumor in my own life. After dinner, I drove home through the hush of Portland rain, the kind that turns streetlights halo soft and makes the city feel like a confession booth. My apartment answered with its usual quiet, that faithful loneliness that greeted me at the door and followed me to the kitchen. I opened my laptop, found the scheduled payment, and hovered. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. "Cancel. Are you sure?" My finger shook when I clicked yes, and the relief that came was so sharp it hurt, like blood returning to a sleeping limb. I pulled the folder from the bottom drawer, the one I used to reassure myself I wasn't imagining it. Month by month, printed statements spread across the table like a time-lapse of loss. Some months were $500, some 1,500. When the text said it was a tough month, I sent 2,008 noodles that tasted like duty. I added the totals, and the pencil line under 72 balls. 1,000 might as well have been a scar. Pain makes you small. Choice makes you taller. The next morning, I laced my running shoes and ran along the river until my lungs burned, until the air changed weight inside me. I joined a Thursday cooking class where my soup finally earned applause. I didn't have to buy with blood. I took tougher projects at work because numbers never called me dramatic. They simply told the truth you asked them to tell. When my director stopped by my desk late one evening and said, "Your focus is rare," my throat tightened with a joy so unfamiliar I almost didn't recognize it. A month later, the offer arrived from a Seattle fintech. More money, equity, an ask that treated my mind like a cathedral instead of an ATM. I printed the email and pressed my palm to the paper, as if the ink could read my thank you. Moving was a goodbye I didn't grieve. The city had watched me be loyal to a house that forgot my name. It could watch me leave. In Seattle, I stood on a new balcony with the Space Needle muscling up through the sky and felt, for once, the world tilt toward me. When the math said I could finally buy a place of my own, I toured apartments with windows like open throats drinking light. The one I chose held morning sun like a promise. I turned the key, stepped into the echoing room, and said, "Mine!" And the word didn't ask permission from anyone. That night I posted a photo of the view with 2 words "new beginning" and put my phone face down when Elise's message arrived. "You're really something. Why didn't you tell the family?" I poured a glass of wine and answered the only person left who needed to hear it myself. The photo of the Space Needle glowing against a Seattle sunset should have been nothing more than a milestone for me, a quiet marker of freedom, yet within days of posting it, the call from Mrs. Jensen shattered that fragile calm. Her voice carried the same mix of warmth and worry I had known since childhood. "Nora, dear, I thought you should know," she said. And then came the image. A banner stretched across my parents' house, bold red letters that screamed what my family wanted the world to believe. "Congratulations, Elise, for preserving the family home." The words seared into me. I could almost hear the snip of scissors as if someone had cut me out of every memory. Every sacrifice, every 2A transfer. I sat there in my apartment. The view of Seattle spread before me, and the air grew heavy with betrayal. They weren't just ignoring me anymore, they were rewriting history, erasing me, and dressing my sister in the skin of my sacrifice. My body went cold, then hot, then hollow. I reached for the folder I had never thrown away. Every bank statement, every printed receipt, every text from my mother that began with "just this once." The weight of the papers in my hands reminded me I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the years that slipped away while I bought their survival with my youth. Grief turned into a steady flame of resolve. They could hang banners, throw parties, and plaster Elise's name across every wall of that house. But I had the evidence, the numbers, the dates, the pleading words typed in the dark. It was all there, undeniable. That night I didn't sleep. I poured the statements across my table, inputting every transfer into a fresh spreadsheet, turning raw pain into graphs and charts as if I were preparing a case for trial. The line of payments rose like a mountain, each bar another reminder of how much I had given. At the top, 70,000 glowed in bold, a number that screamed louder than any denial. I added the text messages too. The promise "just this once" repeated 36 times until it looked like a chant, a ritual I had been forced to believe in. I placed that screenshot under the heading, "The promise, just this once," 36 times. My hands trembled, but not with fear. It was the tremble of clarity, of a sword finally sharpened after years of rust. I bound the report, printed extra copies, and tucked a USB into my bag. When my cousin Sarah called to whisper about the family appreciation dinner they were planning in Seattle, my decision was already made. This would not be another night of applause for Elise and silence for me. This time, the truth would walk into the room. The night of the dinner, I stood outside the glowing restaurant, watching relatives stream in dressed in pride. Through the window I saw Elise in an emerald dress, radiant in her borrowed crown, my parents beside her with faces stretched by satisfaction. I stepped inside only when the slideshow began, each picture a wound, the house lit by snow, Elise on the porch, captions dripping with gratitude. My father's voice filled the hall. "We are so fortunate Elise preserved our home." The applause swelled. Knives clinked against plates, glasses raised high. And then the final slide shifted, not to words thanking Elise, but to a chart of bank transfers. Month after month, silence crashed through the room. I walked forward slowly, heels echoing, the USB already feeding truth into their carefully staged lie. My chest pounded, but my voice came steady. "If the truth embarrasses you," I said, eyes on my parents, "that is not my fault." Gasps rippled through the hall. My report flashed across the screen, numbers climbing. Text messages displayed for everyone to see. 3 years, $72,000. I saw uncles and aunts exchanging whispers, cousins staring wide-eyed. The applause this time did not belong to Elise. It began hesitantly, then grew until the hall shook with it. My mother's lips trembled. My father gripped the microphone as if it could anchor him. Elise bowed her head in shame, and I stood, no longer the shadow, but the one holding the light. The applause that filled the hall wasn't the sound of triumph. It was the sound of release, of chains snapping one by one. I stood beneath the warm lights, the glow of my own evidence towering behind me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't begging to be seen. I was undeniable. My father's face collapsed into stone, his eyes darting to relatives who were already murmuring. My mother's shoulders sagged, her lips quivering as if she might cry. Though no tears came, Elise sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes shimmering with humiliation. The proud emerald of her dress now a costume she couldn't wear without burning. I turned back to the screen and pointed once. Simple and direct, this is the truth. 3 years, $72,000. Without it, the house would have been gone. You know it. I know it. And now, so does everyone else. The hall erupted again. But this time it wasn't polite applause. It was the rustle of judgment, whispers that darted like arrows. I caught fragments. She carried it all herself. How could they give the credit away? Unforgivable. The air itself had shifted. And I knew there was no salvaging the image my parents had painted. The performance was over. The mask ripped clean away. I let the silence stretch, then lowered my hand. I had said enough. Truth doesn't need volume, it just needs oxygen. I walked out under the weight of every gaze, my heels striking the wooden floor like a gavel sealing a verdict. The Seattle night hit me cool and sharp. I stood for a moment on the steps, breathing in the dark sky spangled with stars, feeling the air sweep through me like a baptism. Inside, the family story had collapsed. Outside, mine had begun. Relief coursed through my veins. Not sweetness, not victory, just the raw, aching relief of no longer carrying a weight that never belonged to me. I had not come to destroy them, but I would not let them destroy me either. 2 days later, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I peered through the peephole, my breath caught. My parents. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying, her body wrapped in a heavy coat that looked too big for her now. My father seemed smaller. The authority that once ruled dinners shrunk into silence, his hands buried in his pockets. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. They stepped inside, hesitant, as though the brightness of my apartment shamed them. My mother spoke first, voice trembling. Nora, I'm sorry. We were wrong. We should have acknowledged you, not let you carry it all alone. After the other night, we talked. We'll add your name to the deed. You deserve it. For a moment, the younger me stirred inside. The girl who had begged silently for validation, who had swallowed shame like medicine and prayed for recognition. But standing in my own apartment, my keys gleaming on the counter, the walls painted in colors I chose, I realized something. I no longer needed their paper, their house, their belated confessions. I shook my head, steady but kind. I have a home now. I have my own life. I don't need to be tied to the past anymore. The words struck them harder than anger could have. My mother's lips parted in protest, then closed. My father cleared his throat. But that was your work. Your sacrifice, you earned it. I cut in gently. What I deserve isn't a name on your deed. What I deserve is respect. And you couldn't give me that. My father turned his face away. My mother's shoulders trembled. But I didn't bend this time. I had already built something greater than their approval. When they left, the silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was spacious. I sat by the window, watching the lights ripple over the river, and felt every moment of the last 3 years settle into clarity. Those nights of wiring money, the tears I hid after every dinner, the countless times I believed their promises, all of it had forged me into steel. I no longer hated the sacrifices because they had carved out a strength I never knew I had. And I no longer craved the place at their table because I had built my own. That night, as I leaned back in my chair, I felt something inside me loosen for good. I wasn't the shadow of Elise, the sensitive one, the forgotten daughter. I was Nora, the woman who had saved a house, walked away from its silence, and built a home with her own hands, the woman who no longer needed their story because she had written her own. And somewhere deep within, a message burned bright, not just for me, but for anyone who had ever been erased. Your worth is not in the roles others cast you in, nor in the shadows they confine you to. It is in the resilience you build, the truth you refuse to bury, and the courage to stand in your own light. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you, if you've ever felt unseen and had to carve your own path, please subscribe to Vengeance Within. Your support means everything, and together, we'll keep sharing the truths that demand to be heard.